What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eastern Current. This is our fishing podcast here, and we are stoked about tonight. We're going to go over. I actually was going to do another Flounder podcast tonight because there's just so much to talk about with Flounder. Or maybe I was even thinking about maybe like a speckled trout, like late summer speckled trout. But Facebook member messaged me and said, "Hey, do one about different types of bait and how to catch bait and how to rig bait and different styles of what and ways to fish the bait." I was like, "Man, that's a really good podcast." We've talked about bait fishing and stuff, but we haven't really dove into just different styles of bait, not necessarily like bait fishing for redfish or bait fishing for flounder. We've done that, but kind of just a broad look at the different bait that is productive to fishers. So I think it'll be a good one. Before we start, go check out our Eastern Current Fishing Facebook page where you can, download and meet other listeners and kind of build this community that we've got here. Go check out Michael's Instagram, YellowFury18, my personal Instagram, Jud Brock Fishing. You can check out the Eastern Current Instagram page. We're all the only thing we really don't have is Twitter. You can check us out on YouTube. You can check us out anywhere. If you are watching the YouTube video, press the thumbs up button. Mash that thumbs up. That helps us out. That helps us get found by other viewers out there. And if you are listening on any podcast platform, please rate us on there. That helps us out a lot as well. We put in a lot of time and effort to bring y'all good content, and that little stuff just helps out so much. But I'm going to bring Mike on here, and we're going to get to start talking about some different bait that y'all can fish around here. What's up, man?
Not much. How are you today?
Oh, doing all right. I will go ahead and confess that this is our second time trying to record tonight. We got almost done with it, and then Mike's internet dropped, and when it dropped, it froze my computer, and it was froze for a while, and so then I tried to cut it off, and sometimes it saves it when that happens, sometimes it doesn't. It did not. It was there, the file was there, but it wouldn't open, so maybe there's some way to save it, but I figured it'd be just as easy to just hop back on here and go again. So this is take 2, so you're going to get even more in-depth information, or we're going to think we already said it and forget about it. But yeah, thanks for hopping on here with me tonight, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, y'all will start to see Mike in more and more of these podcasts. We both have flexible evening schedules or schedules that work well together in the evenings, and so we're going to collaborate on a lot of these ideas. We fish very similar styles. We've fished together longer than anyone that I fished with still, as far as inshore fishing goes. So we've got a lot of stories. We've got a lot of history. We understand how each other work well in the water, and we fish well together. So hopefully that means we'll podcast well together and be able to bring y'all some good knowledge. But we're going to go over mostly the different types of bait fish and fish to use for bait here too, but I think we're going to touch a little bit on blue crabs, mud crabs, fiddler crabs, stuff like that, shrimp, squid. But we're mainly we're talking about baits for inshore fish, so flounder, trout, redfish. That's what the whole premise of this situation is here. Is we're not talking about all the baits that you can use to catch any fish. We're what's best in what scenario, like what bait's best, how to rig it, and what fish it's going to catch. So we'll bring that to you. And I think we should start out with redfish. Kind of go through, I know I'm breaking this down differently than how we did it earlier, but I think it'll be a little more productive. Redfish, let's talk about the different baits and ways to rig those baits for redfish. This will be a little more organized of a way than my first, just try to tackle the whole thing. So, Mike, you started out. Give me your top baits that you like to fish for redfish. And we're talking live baits.
Yeah, live bait depends on the time of year. So let's break it down even farther.
I like it.
Summertime versus wintertime. Summertime, you can't beat a mullet.
Yeah.
That's my go-to, and right behind it is a menhaden. If I can find the right size menhaden, which we've been talking about, fishing big baits, that kind of stuff. If I can find the right size menhaden where they're in that 4, 5, 6 inch range, that's what I'm looking for when it comes to a menhaden.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to get some bigger ones, but as far as summertimes go, mullet, menhaden are the big ones.
Definitely.
Then during the winter, once the trash fish are gone, your pinfish, your lizard fish, all that kind of stuff, little bluefish, I'll start fishing the shrimp. And I do really good on shrimp during the winter.
Yeah.
So, and, it doesn't have to be anything special, bait shrimp, whatever you can get your hands on, shrimp-wise.
Definitely.
So I don't really experiment too much, which we've talked about squid and different things, which I've never really tried. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know why I said squid in the first place because I've never fished
Yeah.
squid for redfish either. I'm sure if a redfish swam past a big chunk of squid, it would eat it.
Oh yeah.
But that's more of like a offshore bottom fishing or like, hey, let's go catch some pinfish.
Yeah.
Or, hey, let's go catch some spot and pinfish to use for bait. So maybe that would be a scenario in which it would work. But
But I mean, even like to throw in some odd stuff, I have caught clams, especially when it comes to like black drum and stuff. When I'm like kind of fishing that deep water stuff where I can get black drum or red drum.
yeah.
Clams. You showed me blue crabs, like how to cut them up, which that's something you can talk about.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit more. But yeah, I mean that's really the three that I stick with: mullet, menhaden, and shrimp. And my mullet, I'm kind of looking in that same size class, 4 to 6 inches. So when it comes to summertime,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, me and Mike talked a lot about in the previous recording that got deleted about bait size. People are very nervous to throw larger live baits, but I found not only does it catch larger fish, usually it catches more fish. Like there's so many little baits out there. So many little small white mullet and little tiny pinfish and whatnot. Something a little bit bigger, just an easy, simple, one bite meal for those fish is pretty key. Like a lot of times when you catch a flounder or a redfish or a trout and he throws up a bait, it's a pretty big bait. I mean, if you think about it, it's usually not small little mullet, and not that they don't eat them, but I mean, if you're really hungry and a tiny little cheeseburger is sitting there and a big cheeseburger sitting there, and someone was like, these are gonna leave you if you don't take one right now, I'd grab the big cheeseburger. If not, I'd sit there and eat both of them. But if I had to pick one, like on a spur of the moment choice, I'd pick the big one.
Oh yeah. Well, I think too, if you look at bait sizes, when you're hooking them, either jig head, Carolina rig, whatever, you're pinning them down to a certain area that those fish can get a hold of them. They can ambush that bigger prey easier. Versus when those bigger mullet are, up swimming around and everything, like they have to work a little harder for it. So I think if you put it right there on their dinner plate where they can eat it, they're a lot more apt to get it.
Yeah, definitely. It's giving them that opportunity. It's something swimming a little differently, acting a little nervous that they key in on and usually smash it. But some other fish that you can use as bait that kind of get overlooked here in North Carolina, spot's a great one, and pinfish. Pinfish is like probably one of the most popular large baits for inshore fish in most other states. North Carolina, it's kind of looked down upon, but I was fishing with my buddy Elias off the beach the other day for flounder, and he was showing me how to trim the dorsal fin off of the pinfish to kind of get some of that, the spikiness off the fish and kind of slim the profile down a little bit, slender the fish out. And he dropped that thing on the bottom, and in like 30 seconds, nice flounder ate it. He pulled it off, but I mean, a definite flounder just smacked that pinfish.
Heck yeah.
So there's not a bad bait to use. Like I used to always throw pinfish back, but now I'm keeping them, putting them in the live well. And I definitely like the pinfish around big structure more so than like creeks. I like fishing around docks, jetties, artificial reefs off the beach. Mullet is typically my go-to in the creeks, or small spot, or mud minnows, or menhaden. But what if someone? So you said mullet's king for you, like over menhaden?
Yeah, I think it's just because it's easier for me to keep them alive in my live well.
Yeah.
And I can always go find a mullet.
Yeah, definitely.
But if I run across the school of menhaden, you better bet the cast net's coming out and I'm going to get on them, But I don't want to go spend an hour looking for menhaden in the morning.
Right.
When I get mullet in 20 minutes and be done and on my way.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. It's yeah, but then at the same time, yeah. Some days the mullet are easier to catch, some days the menhaden are easier to catch. It's funny. Especially if you're like really trying to key in on a certain size of either one. It's like, golly. I swear you used to, man.
One days and
yeah.
Little guys the next.
Some summers in my marina, man, I can just walk down to my boat and stand on the back of it for 10 minutes and a school of menhaden swims by. There's usually like a couple schools of peanuts, a couple schools of big ones, and I can just sit there, as my boat's lowering down and throw the net and get my bait for the day. But that has not been the case, really, even the past 2 years. So,
Dang.
Yeah, it's been a little frustrating having to get out there in the waterway and hunt it down, but it is what it is. Michael, I got this little summer cold. Michael was talking about how I've shared fishing blue crabs, and that's been a big game changer. Any of the harder shell crabs like that. Fiddler crabs are great baits for black drum will eat them, redfish will eat them. I've never caught a trout on one. I really don't think that the trout are looking for that type of meal. I'm not going to say they wouldn't eat it, but it never would be what I use to target trout or flounder. Yeah. But fiddler crabs are my last resort in the crab game because they're so excuse me, brittle that the littlest sea bass, the littlest pinfish can rip it right off the hook. I mean, I've had great days fishing them, but you fish a mud crab or you fish, a quartered blue crab, and you've got a lot more time in the game. You can leave that bait down there through a lot of little trash bites, as opposed to a fiddler crab. You drop it down and you feel like your fiddler crab's probably gone. You just have to hope that the sheep's head is the first fish to interact with your bait. Yeah. And then when you have a mud crab or a blue crab, you're buying a lot more time down there, where you can potentially hook that correct fish. Crab is a great bait to fish on the nearshore wrecks if you really want to target black drum, sheep's head, and redfish, because the little trash fish, on the mud crab and the blue crab, they can't tear it up too quick, as to where like a bait fish, they can rip a bait fish off a hook really easily. And you don't get the shark bites. You eliminate shark bites with crabs, which is really nice. So if you're in a really sharky area trying to catch a redfish off the beach, definitely try crab. I don't know about clam. I don't know if sharks eat clam. I haven't fished clam as much as you have. Have you had much interaction with sharks when fishing clam?
No, I've really just used the clam during the winter.
Gotcha.
When I'm targeting like docks and stuff, looking for schools of drum and red drum and black drum.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, something. If I find a couple during the day, I'll grab them and, put them on the hook, and I always catch something on them.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but I've never really tried them off the beach. That'd be something to do. Maybe this winter.
Yeah, definitely. But I've heard those big black drum, you put a whole clam on there, they'll eat it.
Yeah.
Eat it right up. It's one of the weirdest things I've caught them on, and I mean, it makes sense, but I had a trout fishing trip this past winter. It was like December. And actually, I don't think we ended up catching a fish that day on this. But we caught them. We were on a flat looking for redfish. They had been in there. We didn't see any redfish. I looked to the left. I'm like, what the heck is that thing? And it was a big octopus. And it was like a foot of water on this flat. It was freezing cold, and there's this octopus swimming across it. And the octopus gets real scared and sits on the bottom. And I was like, reel your jig head to your rod tip. And he reeled his jig head to his rod tip. I was like, stick it down there and just snag him. We snagged him, kept it. They took it home and ate it. Because octopus, every time I catch octopus, like on the jetty or near shore wreck, I keep it. I think they're delicious. But we tried to use the little octopus as bait on a school of redfish where we knew where they were, and no dice really. But if they eat squid, I'm sure they eat octopus.
Oh yeah,
it's not quite as stinky as other baits, but it's definitely a meal. Well, let's kind of transition into how we would rig these different baits. Just go through two or three of like your favorite ways to rig a live bait for redfish.
Okay. Probably when it comes to mullet, I'm just using either a circle hook or jig head and running it through their right in front of their eyeballs, kind of in that clear spot on the end of their nose.
Uh-huh.
That way I'm not really hitting their brain. I'm not messing with their eyes or anything, but I'm still in that hard part of their skull.
Okay.
That's the number one way of doing it. And then menhaden, I'm doing the same thing. And I'm a lot of times with the menhaden, I'll even turn the hook sideways, kind of like you're bridling the bait, and run it through their nose. That way. The only thing that I hate with menhaden fishing them that way, they stay alive longer, but they come off a lot easier.
Yeah.
So if I'm fishing dead menhaden, I'll just run it through the nose like normal. But or if it's kind of on its last leg, go through the nose. But and then let's see. If like today actually, and I noticed this last weekend when I was fishing for flounder, I had a bunch of hits and I kept missing the fish, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I actually switched and started tail hooking everything and started catching more fish. I don't know if it was the way that the bait was going through the current or just the way, like the places I was fishing, the fish were positioned differently, so they were eating it from a different angle to where they were grabbing it at the back.
Yeah.
And, not getting the hook or what, because a lot of fish will eat it head on eat a bait head on. So, I don't know. But definitely I'll switch back and forth between, nose hooking them versus tail hooking them. Just kind
Yeah,
of depends on the day and what I'm doing.
definitely.
So, and with, we were talking about this earlier on the first one, like, I don't tail hook anything in super heavy current.
Yeah,
And that was something that you brought up earlier. So, that's just something, depending on the situation and where you're at, you kind of have to pick and choose how you want to rig your bait too.
definitely.
So,
It's definitely key to not tail hook in heavy current, just for that simple reason of drowning your bait. If you're fishing stationary and heavy current, I mean, if you're drifting, you can tail hook, but if you're sitting stationary where your weight's on the bottom holding your bait in place, you're gonna drown that bait eventually. Like, maybe at first he can kind of fight it, but as he gets tired, he's gonna swing around down current and he's gonna get drowned real quickly. As to where you're pretty much trolling him off that weight during or while it's nose hooked, and keeping that bait, getting fresh water through its gills and everything, or salt water through its gills.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's pretty clutch. Are you when you're fishing crab or anything like that, are you Carolina rigging it for the most part?
Yeah. I mean, if I fish crab in a creek or something where I'm like targeting a certain area where I know like there's redfish or black drum or something, then I'll put it on a jig head just because I like the sensitivity of being directly connected to the hook.
Yeah,
But, for everything else, yeah, Carolina rigging.
for sure.
So just being able to chunk and let it sit.
Yeah, another great rig to use is like the bottom sleeper jig if you're fishing a crab in on structure in deep water or up in a creek. Bottom sleeper jig, the first flight sheep's head jigs or whatever they're called, and then the jailbait's another good crab option. But the jailbait is really, it's by eye strike. It's really just designed for fiddler crabs. So if you are fishing fiddler crabs, whatever eats that fiddler crab, you will hook. That's the ticket. I mean, you cannot steal a crab off of that rig. It's amazing. But like I said, I don't fish fiddlers that much, and so I fish that when I'm fishing fiddler crabs. But I'm typically on like a bottom sweeper, or typically a bottom sleeper jig fishing crabs, if not a Carolina rig.
Yeah.
So, but well, cool. I think we've kind of touched everything on redfish there. Maybe we can transition to. Let's talk flounder first. I think that'll be the quickest. Yeah, that'll be the closest relation. I feel. What do you feel like eats more of the similar baits? A flounder and a redfish, or a trout and a redfish?
I don't know. Trout and redfish, they have that hunting mentality versus like flounder are more of an ambush predator.
Right.
But as far as baits go,
I feel like maybe trout and flounder are the most alike as far as what they eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
redfish are a little more diverse. They eat a little bit more stuff.
Yeah, like crabs and stuff, I'm doing a little bit more directly related to drum versus flounder and trout.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk trout then. Let go. Give me some of your favorite baits to fish for trout around here.
Trout, I love menhaden.
Yeah.
Menhaden are really, really good, and mullet. Most of the time, by the time like the really good fall trout bite starts to show up, the menhaden are starting to kind of go away. So it's kind of hard to find menhaden a lot of days. So I'm fishing mullet most of the time. But I feel like when I have really good days of trout fishing, it's when I can get some good menhaden.
Yeah, definitely.
So
definitely. There's been my buddy sent me some really cool videos of him fishing live mullet on just light line, like knowing where the trout are in a creek. This is up in the Pamlico Sound. Dead of winter, pitching live mullet. He trims the tail a certain way that makes the mullet swim on the surface. And so it just stays on the surface swimming around. Then he's got these videos of these big trout just coming up and sucking them down. It's crazy.
That's awesome.
But yeah, mullet, menhaden's great. Shrimp, another great bait. The cool thing about this time of year is if you know where quality trout are, or where they should be, and you can go catch some shrimp, you can smack them. But the same downfall that you have with shrimp, a lot of the warmer months is the trash fish, and so that's what kind of brings me back to mullet. I really stay away. One thing we forgot to talk about is mud minnows, but I kind of stay away from mud minnows once I can get my hands on mullet and menhaden. I just feel like they've got a lot more action, a lot more flash on the end of the line. I get more bites on them. But do you fish shrimp much? Live shrimp in the winter or anything like that for trout?
Not really. Typically, I don't put the time into it.
Right.
So maybe like in the fall, like early fall, when the trout like just are starting to kick on, and it's kind of one of those days where a live shrimp could be a game changer. Then I'll go take the time and either buy them or go catch them. But for the most part, I'm not that they're not a good bait or anything. I'm just not spending the money or the time to go get them.
Yeah. The cool thing about those cooler months when bait's harder to find, when it's cool outside, you can keep menhaden alive for so long. I mean, not menhaden, sorry, mud minnows alive for so long. So you can either catch them or buy them. But in my garage, I got a tank in there, like a little from Tractor Supply and an aerator, and it'll almost look like a little fish factory in the wintertime when I am fishing those menhaden for the trout or not. I keep calling them menhaden, the mud minnows. Sorry about my throat clearing here. Having those on demand is very nice. Not having to go try to catch bait, and what you can do is run traps for those mud minnows. You can run them year round. I mean, you want to keep them where it's going to be pretty shallow at dead low tide. But those mud minnows are great baits, especially in the winter when there's very little bait around. Like this time of year, a mud minnow just kind of disappears in the water pretty easily. But in the winter when it's crystal clear and there's very little bait, a little dark brown bait fish flipping around is very noticeable to trout, flounder, and redfish. Let's talk a little bit about how you catch bait, Mike. We kind of forgot about this. I think we talked about it on our first recording that got deleted. But what kind of net do you throw?
So running flat skiff, which you've got your Maverick, but you've also got the big Jones Brothers. Just being in a flat skiff, I like to carry one net.
Yeah.
So I'll carry a 7-foot, either heavy or extra heavy. I think right now I probably just have the heavy, with a 3/8 mesh, and that is big enough that if I get on a school of menhaden or something, I can get a big enough spread to get some menhaden. But it's also a small enough mesh that early in the year, when the mullet and stuff are small, I'm still able to catch those guys. So that's typically that's what I'm sticking with. So
yeah, definitely. It's nice to have those heavier. The smaller, diameter is nice, but with that extra weight, I mean, I've got an offshore net. I don't throw it much. I'm usually trying to find my bait inshore. We just don't. If I was down in the river, like off Oak Island and whatnot, a lot of times there's bait in the ocean, but still it's shallower down there. We just don't often have the bait off the beach up here, like on a regular basis. It's not where I'm like, all right, that's where I'm going to catch bait. It's kind of the last resort if I can't find it anywhere else. And I throw a 7-foot heavy too. Now that was my newest net that I got this year, and or extra heavy I think is what it's called. But I really really like that net. And the wider the mesh size, the quicker it sinks as well. So you're not going to catch the smaller baits, but like me and Mike have been saying, like a larger bait oftentimes is the better choice. If for the only reason it's just going to be seen easier by the fish. Even if the fish doesn't eat, whether I'm throwing an artificial or a live bait, like if the fish doesn't eat it, I at least want like the confidence in my head that like, all right, if there was a fish in that zone, he at least saw what I was throwing. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's how I think. Some people are real finessey and want to make like 1,000 casts on a bank. I want to make like 10 casts on a bank with something that they're going to see.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, that's even like going back to our Flounder podcast from a few weeks ago. Like, I'm almost like a bass fisherman. Like, I'm picking apart high percentage areas.
Right.
A point, a transition, grass change, something that's going to key to have a fish holding it.
Definitely.
Not to say that you can't catch them anywhere else, but like you said, I want that big bait. I want to be able to put it right there, know that he saw it, and move on and be able to cover the water.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think, that comes with time, being able to fish like that, like having the confidence to move through an area and just make those key casts. But I think overall it will make you a more productive fisherman. I see a lot of people sitting in spots, whether it be in the river, whether it be around Wrightsville Beach, Topsail Beach, Figure 8, sitting in an area that they've caught fish in before and just beating it up and up and up and moving through an area. I mean, if you're hitting, a lot of redfish in an area or a lot of trout in an area, it's worth staying. But I mean, don't wait in a spot too long, whether you're bait fishing or throwing artificials. I mean, unless you know without, a shadow of a doubt that at this tide it's going to fire off in here, keep moving. Like if you throw a bait in an area and there's a fish in there, it should be eaten within, 30 seconds. Yeah. And I wouldn't say 30 seconds is how long you need to sit somewhere, but give each spot 15 minutes when you're soaking bait and move. 10 minutes, 12 minutes, and move and keep moving until you find a more productive area. Especially right now, like focusing on flounder. It's like, flounder move around, but they're not moving around like redfish are. They'll come to a bait and they'll slowly work their way into a bait, but you're more productive to hit an area, move 50 yards, hit the next corner, move 75 yards to the next corner of the creek, hit the next point, the next oyster point, the next creek mouth. Like just keep moving and find those fish. I mean, my best days are typically when I'm covering a lot of water, whether that's with redfish. Maybe not so much with trout. Sometimes you get on that little honey bucket of trout and you're better off to just sit there and work through them, figure out what they want to eat. But with flounder and redfish, like just covering water is the ticket. At least inshore.
Yep.
So,
that's a good side.
Sorry, that was quite a rant there. Yeah. But yeah, so we were talking trout bait. I think really, menhaden, mullet, shrimp. Spot, like a big spot could be a really good trout bait as well. Pinfish. I've seen some big freaking trout caught in Florida on pinfish. I'm like, I just lose confidence sometimes when I hook a pinfish on and pitch it out there, because to me it's just like this little trash fish. But I don't know, you put it in the right scenario where it doesn't belong and it'll probably get munched by a trout. Have you done much trout fishing with pinfish?
Not with pinfish. I mean, most of the time when I'm getting pinfish, I'm headed off the beach.
Yeah.
Like 5 miles plus, that's my bottom bait for the day.
Yeah.
But that's something I definitely want to start doing. Is we're starting to get those bigger pinfish in that 2, 3, 4 inch range right now, where you're getting them in the cast net pretty consistently.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of start focusing in on that and giving them a shot.
For sure. Yeah, it's like every cast net throw, you're usually getting like one pinfish bait. So
yeah,
I mean, they're not schooled up. Thank God they're not schooled up like mullet are. But they are great baits. So don't throw your random weird fish back. Go throw them in the live well and try soaking them. Sometimes you'll be surprised what will key in on that bait. Something a little bit different. The shrimp, like I was saying earlier, great bait all year. But in the warmer months, it can be so painful to fish those baits. But I was fishing a deep water piece of structure. I'm not going to name it because it's very well known. But not many people fish it. A deep water piece of structure for black drum. Was not having any luck. I was fishing blue crab, quartered blue crab, and I had thrown the cast on a bunch of mud minnows in a creek and caught a bunch of nice big shrimp the other day. And I was in 42, 43 feet of water, and I had a kid and a dad. We caught a few small black drum, and then I was like, let's put some shrimp on there. We'll probably catch some croakers or something. So I was putting a live shrimp on a Carolina rig with an ounce, dropping it down 40 feet, and just getting thumped by trout immediately. And there was trout in the middle of this deep water, eating these live shrimp in the middle of the summer. So, think outside the box. You've got good baits. Go try something different like that. Try a big piece of structure. See what you can do. And I was catching some croaker, but I was catching more black drum and trout on the shrimp out there than I was catching, any trash fish. So, and the croaker were big golden suckers too. They were like some big old croaker. They didn't want to keep them and eat them, but I was like, these are good. They're good eating. Don't hate on the croaker. Well, cool. Let's move into flounder. I think this is everybody's favorite topic right now. It looks like everybody in the whole freaking North Carolina is mad at a flounder right now. So, tell me what your go-to flounder bait is.
So we're 1 week into the season today, and
wow, it seems like it's been in for like 3 months.
But in that entire week, I found one school of menhaden and wasn't able to pick any up. So all I've done is fish mullet, and all my flounder have come off of that.
Yeah.
But in years past, when I've been able to get some menhaden, I'm not afraid to get the big boys, 6, 7, 8 inch menhaden, and put them down on Carolina rigs for flounder because they will eat it.
Oh yeah.
So that's probably. That's just my go-to for like everything inshore. It seems like is mullet and menhaden.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot more like spot and that kind of stuff that are a little more off the wall that you're not always catching that I think could either be just as good if not better than mullet menhaden just because it's something that they're not getting a shot to ambush all the time and
Right,
eat on.
right.
So I think those could be better baits. It's just I don't always get a bunch of them to give them a good shot.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely.
Uh-oh.
That's the ticket is like going and catching those pinfish and spots takes time. But what you can do is like, go try to get you, set a number. I'm going to get 10 pinfish. Then I'm going to go throw on some mullet, and have some mullet. And when you're in that right area, drop down those bigger, a little more out of the box baits and outside the box baits, not out of the box. Out of the box sounds like it's a new lure that you just opened. But drop those down and see what happens because it's surprising how fish will key in on those, those larger profile, those different baits. And, I think those fish are competitive. Spots and trout and pinfish, they're all kind of in the similar areas inshore. And I think, the trout will probably be frustrated and boxing those other fish out. And I've heard, some really big fish come on those. And I've hooked some quality flounder, trout, redfish on those. So it's always something I want to do more of, but it's hard to do on a guide trip. Like I just don't have the spots and the time to burn to go catch the pinfish and the spot, and and plus it's hard to catch a spot around here right now.
Yeah.
Have you had any luck fishing anything other than mullet and menhaden for trout as far as live and shrimp as far as flounder go?
Not really. I mean, that's kind of always my go-to.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys, especially if they go out off the beach, near shore wrecks, even to the jetty, they're fishing squid a lot of times. Big squid strips in like 7-8 inches long. And mainly though, the reason for that length is just to give it enough time that as it gets picked apart by everything else down there, that, there's still bait for whenever that flounder comes in. But, it's just not something I do a whole lot of.
Yeah, I've heard flounder belly too. I've never fished it, but like a lot of the Chesapeake Bay boys and the Virginia Beach guys that they fish those, or they'll take a belly strip and kind of fish that on a bucktail jig or on a Carolina rig even. I've heard, and those flounder will eat it. Which to me, I would have no confidence. I guess once a lot of baits, it's like they're not going to eat this, and then they eat it, and you're like, oh, all right, this works.
Yeah.
So that's how it was with the pinfish, man. It was so hard for me to like fish a pinfish, and then you get one bite and then you get a second bite and you're like, oh wow, they do eat these. So I think that's pretty clutch. How do you like to rig your live baits when you're flounder fishing? I know we've talked about this in the last podcast, but for anybody that's keyed in just on this one, what do you like to do?
Well, like I was saying earlier, like when I'm jig head fishing, a lot of times I'm nose hooking, but I'm kind of paying attention to how the fish are eating my bait, and I'll change between the two, and location wise, change between nose hooking them and tail hooking them.
Yeah.
Carolina rig or the reverse Carolina rig, like we were talking about. The reverse Carolina rig, you definitely have to nose hook with, just because you're holding that bait so straight, and there's not a whole lot of room for that bait to move around, like you do with a Carolina rig.
Right.
But with a Carolina rig, if the current's right, real light or something like that, I like to tail hook baits just because I feel like they stay alive a little longer for flounder. And when they kind of swallow it, the way they position it, I don't know if it makes a huge difference, but it always seems to last a little longer for me.
Definitely.
So
yeah, it's funny, man. There's so many ways to rig all these different baits and to fish these different baits, and they can all be effective. It's just learning, what you need to do in your scenarios. And so hopefully this podcast, as people listen, is kind of opening up, ideas and opening up doors to be like, oh, this is what I need to do in this scenario. Oh, I heard him talking about this. I haven't tried that. We don't have all the answers, but as we, collaborate and talk about all these different types of fishing, new things pop up in my head all the time on this podcast of like, oh, I'm going to try that in this scenario. So hopefully that's helping out. One thing that we're just around the corner from is, and it's really already here, but up north of us, and a few big fish are being caught here, but bull redfish, like big old drum It's that time of year here in North Carolina, and really through the end of October, November, we can catch them. And I think it's important to talk about, before we wrap this thing up, kind of some baits that are effective for that and how to rig those baits. And I'll go through my favorite first, and I'll let Michael jump on it. But we talked about the crab, the quartered blue crab, and I'll do a video on the YouTube channel of how to quarter a blue crab and fish it, because it's kind of hard to explain without seeing it, like how to do the different parts of the shell. So I'll do a video of that. But there's probably already something on YouTube if you're eager to go try it out. But don't check it out. Wait and watch mine. I'm just kidding. You can go check it out. Quartered blue crab, big mud crabs can be very productive. Smaller blue crabs, I don't know if it's illegal to fish smaller blue crabs here. There's a keeper size of blue crab that you're allowed to fish. So
I know, as long as it's not a female, like, definitely make sure you're not fishing females. Yeah. But as far as the jimmies go, I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's that's something that I probably should know before I say, hey, go fish smaller blue crabs for fish. But I know, like, down in the Keys and whatnot, you can go buy them for permit, and or maybe you're not buying the small blue crabs. Maybe you're buying those old calico crabs down there. I can't even remember. But quarter blue crab, mud crabs, that's very, very productive. Big menhaden, spots, big mullet. Definitely don't go little on your baits for those fish. Like, they'll eat anything, but they're just like big bulldogs cruising around down there. They're just looking for a big bite, a big meal. I shared this earlier. I don't think I shared it on this. I shared it on the other podcast that got deleted, so that's why we're recording this one. That time of year we're starting to do a lot of trout fishing. And what is the most common trash fish that you catch while trout fishing? What do you think it is, Mike? Lizardfish. So throw those lizardfish in the box and cut them up and fish that chunk for those redfish, man. They love it. They eat the mess out of it. So one thing I do like to have always, and I think it's productive in any bait fishing for any type of fish, is a variety of bait. So if you can, if you're on a crunch and you throw a good throw on some mullet and you have a bunch of mullet, you're crunched on time, just fish the mullet. But if you've got time to get some mullet and get a couple menhaden, get some spots, get a couple pinfish, like, take a couple baits. A lot of the guys that are really good at bait fishing are fishing different types of bait in different scenarios each day, and that's how they're catching lots of fish. It's easy to just get complacent and just go catch the little mullet and go sit in the creek that you always catch fish in, and go catch your one or two redfish and one flounder. But try some different stuff and move around and try some different baits and rig them different ways, and you'll really start to learn a lot about how these different fish and bait fish interact with these different game fish in the water. So, I don't know if we missed anything, Michael. Have we kind of covered the bases?
I think we've kind of covered the bases. Yeah. I don't think, unless there's anything you do differently, like whenever you cut up and do like chunk baits for anything. I know, like with lizardfish, I just kind of cut them into half, thirds, whatever. Yeah,
depends on the size. Sometimes you get a big one, you got to cut it, and you can fish like 8 baits out of it.
Yeah. But like menhaden and stuff, like typically a lot of times I cut the head off. I just kind of pitch it over the side as chum, and get like that meaty section down, behind the gill plate, so right around the tail area.
For sure.
And even the same with like big mullet. But I'll keep the head on the big mullet, like the big hard head mullets and striped mullets. Yeah. I'll fish like the head and the little bit of area behind them, just because the head's so easy to get a hook through and it stays on there so well.
Definitely.
But I don't know if you got anything different that you do cutting up bait or anything.
No, not really. I think one thing to think about is your hook size. And when I'm bait fishing, I am thinking about like the size fish I'm going to hook, but more so than anything, I'm thinking about, the accessibility for the mouth to get around the hook. Like if it's a really big mullet, I'm not going to fish a small circle hook, because I'm afraid, as that, that fish eats a bait, and then as it pulls out, the size of that, let's say mullet, keeps the mouth from being able to really clamp around that hook. And so I'll jump my size up. I couldn't really tell you, hey, this is the size hook I fish for, this type of fish or with this bait. It's just you kind of eye it, and you want that hook to just be exposed enough that you feel confident the fish is gonna get it if he eats that bait. But that's really all I can think of. If I'm bait fishing, I'm either fishing a float rig or really a Carolina rig, or maybe like a chicken rig if I'm offshore, like a grouper rig. But inshore, it's really just like a Carolina rig, Sometimes I'll just fish like a split shot just above a circle hook if I'm pitching, in really shallow water to fish. But that's more so like wintertime spooky redfish that won't eat a jig. I'm still trying to sight fish them, but I need that live bait. So really just a Carolina rig and a float rig, a slip float or a clamp float is what I'm going with. And those are all, maybe one day we'll do just a rig podcast where we're just talking about all these different types of rigs. We can have them tied up and show, the viewers of the video style podcast what they look like, but really try to explain them well. I don't know if that'd be more of a video, just an overall video we should do, but I think we've kind of touched it all. I mean, if there's any other baits that y'all like and want us to talk about, definitely drop them in the comments on YouTube or on the podcast. But I hope that opens y'all's eyes a little bit. Fish big baits, fish different baits, and just go freaking fishing.
Heck yeah.
So, well, is there anything you want to leave them with, Mike?
No, I think you pretty much covered it right there at the end.
There we go.
That was
I'm getting so good at this. Out of my mouth. Getting so good at this. Go check out Intercoastal Angler if you need tackle. I've always got one of their shirts on. They've got so many walking billboards around this town. It's crazy.
Oh yeah. Ready for some of your new shirts to come in again?
Oh, I got some in. I'll have to get some to you. I've got some Gillnet's Kill shirts. So.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
I want the tarpon one.
Oh, I need to order some more of those. I'm out of those now. Yeah. Well, cool, guys. Well, thank you all so much for checking out another podcast. We'd love doing this for y'all, and we're going to keep doing it as long as we're living. So keep checking us out. Definitely share us with your friends. If you do like this podcast a lot, tell somebody about it. We're trying to, and I'm trying to really grow this into something that can be, part of, maybe pull back from guiding a little bit and really invest in the content creation, outdoor content creation would be a huge goal of mine. And so thank y'all so much for your support. It's been amazing to see the growth and to see the support of all y'all. And it really encourages me to continue to do this. And I will continue to do this. So thanks for checking this one out. And I will see y'all and talk to y'all in the next podcast. Later.